If you prick us with a pin, don't we bleed? If you tickle us, don't we laugh? If you poison us, don't we die? My name is Bernard, and I bring you greetings from the near and dear campus of Fashion Institute of Technology. Welcome to an evening with Essential Part 5 and filmmaker Sarah Burns, looking back to look forward. It is my distinct pleasure to share this moment with you tonight, a moment that will go down in FIT's history as a stretching moment. One that I hope will cause us to grow as a community as we embark upon a discussion of all things related to diversity and implications thereof. As I ponder tonight, I can't help but feel elated that some small talk and random conversation between Professor Danielson, Levinson, Wilk, and me finally gained traction, and now we're able to have 3 members of the Central Part 5 here to share with us today. And a side note, just right up front, Ms. Burns couldn't join us on today because there was a small incident that we had to deal with. But how many agree we're still going to have a wonderful time with what we've planned tonight? However, I must admit, full disclosure, that I'm a tad bit nervous. I'm wondering if we as a campus community are willing to grow and have more and more discussions surrounding topics like this. Are we mature enough to hear various points of view and, if necessary, agree to disagree? Are we training our students to be responsible thinkers and to question the question? I'm not sure if I have the answers, but my goal when writing the proposal for this diversity grant that has led us to tonight was not to provide any answers, but merely to create an atmosphere where we as a campus community could talk, reflect, ponder, change. Said a professor who planned similar tolerance talks on her University of Delaware campus, quote, "At the very least, people will walk away from these events having seen the country through the eyes of Americans who have walked a different path. Might people get uncomfortable? Of course. But such discomfort can lead to real change," unquote. In that vein, I must pause and thank the administration for being bold and taking a chance to allow the campus to look back and observe the past with the hopes of having a clearer view of what lies ahead. Much like the cover of the program suggests, the driver sits in the driver's seat, glances into the rearview mirror, only so that he or she is able to have a better sense of how to navigate forward. Both vantage points are crucial to a safe arrival. Looking back to look forward. That's what I call a smart driver. Now, I've gotten a few questions about why I decided to undertake this challenge. You're in math. You're not in social sciences or whatever other discipline I'm supposed to be in to care about programs like this. Well, since I am in math, maybe the best way to explain it is some kind of mathy way. I'm sorry you're not going to get out the math lesson for today. No matter who we are, where we come from, how much money we make, how many degrees we have, who we're wearing, and so forth and so on, at the end of the day, we all have this thing in math that allows you to move forward with a certain type of addition when components are different. Mathematicians figured a way of being able for certain numbers to coexist and make addition possible. The numbers are called fractions, and the notion is that of a common denominator. Despite not being the same, common denominators make it so that 2 fractions that start out originally different to become one, to relate together, to survive together, to be added together. It's that thing that binds us more than separates us. Although there may be some differences among us, a sense of commonality among us must breed a sense of civility. Even if our numbers, our outlook, opinions, values differ. So as we celebrate this occasion and this moment, we call forth Shylock to summarize the theme of the evening. You know Shylock in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, the moneylender, who after having been insulted by Antonio, physically assaulted and spat upon quite a few times in the Rialto marketplace, finally talks to himself and asks himself these same common denominator questions. Questions and sentiments that are still relevant today in 2017. As he gets fed up with Antonio's bullying tactics and contemplates revenge, he utters to himself what seems natural. Questions that underscore who he is and his sense of self. If you prick us with a pin, don't we bleed? If you tickle us, don't we laugh? If you poison us, don't we die? We thank the President's Diversity Grant, the UCE of FIT, the Department of Public Safety, and the School of Liberal Arts for helping to make this event possible. We will continue with the program as printed by first having welcoming remarks by our very own Dr. Joyce Brown, President of FIT. Afterward, we will have a poetry recitation by Jeffrey Chambers, and then go straight to viewing the excerpt from the documentary. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. So let's put our hands together and welcome Dr. Joyce Brown.
Thank you, Bernard, and welcome to all of you. I'm delighted to see so many of you here. You know, the subtitle of this evening's event is called Looking Back to Look Forward. And I really cannot think of a better time or a better place in which to do so than now, during Black History Month and here at FIT. Because it's during this month, after all, that we not only celebrate the achievements of African Americans in this country, but we also take the time to learn about and reflect on what has sometimes been politely described as our country's unlovely racial history. And surely the Central Park jogger case fits well within that history. From the outset, it was deeply painful, contentious, controversial, sensational, and of course loudly notorious, so much so that 28 years later, if anyone mentions the Central Park Five to New Yorkers, shall I say, of a certain age, they will instantly know the reference and be able to recite chapter and verse what they think took place. 28 years later, race remains a potent and often divisive force in our society, as President Obama said just before leaving office. And this case continues to be controversial, animating many of the issues that we struggle with as a society and that causes such dissension. Many of you, maybe most of you, were not even born 28 years ago. This is a scary thought, guys. So however familiar you are with this case, I am pleased that we have the opportunity this evening to revisit it in an environment of an educational institution. It's here where reflection, discussion, and debate are welcome. Here where questions can be raised safely and answered safely, even if the answers are not to everyone's liking. It's here where long-held certainties may be challenged, perhaps shed, perhaps reinforced, but all in an environment of respect and an environment which encourages learning. As you know from the program, a panel will follow the documentary with all of our guests participating, and they will engage in a conversation not only among themselves, but also with you, the members of the audience. So I want to thank them personally. I want to thank Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salaam, and Raymond Santana, three of the Central Park Five, as well as the filmmaker Sarah Burns for joining us this evening. I understand Ms. Burns isn't here, but certainly her work is with us. And of course, a great thanks goes to Professor Dillard, who spearheaded and coordinated this important event. And of course, my thanks again to all of you for being here this evening. So enjoy.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Chambers, and I am a photography major. I'm a sophomore. And today I will be reciting a poem by Jamal May entitled Man Matching Description. If you look at your programs on the first page, you can follow along. Because the silk scarf could have cradled a neck as delicate as that of a cygnet, but was instead used in last night's strangling, it is possible to marvel at the finish on handcuffs. Because I can imagine handcuffs pummeled by stones until shimmering. The flashlight that sears my eyes is too perfect to look away. Because a flashlight has more power on the southern roadside than my name and blood combined. And there is no power in the very human frequency range of my voice and my name is dead in my mouth, and my name is in a clear font on the license I can't reach for before being drawn down on. Because the baton is against my window, the gun somehow longer against my cheek, the vehicle cold against my abdomen as my shirt rises, twisted in fingers, and my name is asked again. I want to say, Swan! I am only a swan. Thank you.
So we would like to encourage everyone to watch the entire DVD documentary on your own time. I wish we had endless time, but I know you're ready to talk to the actual characters behind the screen. So we're going to move forward, and we're going to ask that as we're reading the bios, if the guests would stand, enter the stage this way, and take the chairs, please. So first we have Mr. Kevin Richardson. In 2002, after Kevin had spent 12 years behind bars, his sentence was overturned. 10 years later, the Burnses and McMahon released the award-winning film, The Central Park Five, which told of this travesty from the perspective of Kevin and his wrongfully convicted peers. Only 14 years old when he was tried as a juvenile and convicted, Kevin learned to survive and turned his lemons into lemonade. Since being released, he has been on the speaking circuit sharing his story, encouraging young adults, teens, and preteens about being responsible and getting a good education. His speaking influence has reached from Harlem to Harvard. Daily, he continues to inspire youngsters to aim for their best self. In addition to speaking up and out for justice, he enjoys being a husband and father. Mr. Yusef Salaam. Determined to educate the public, Yusef eagerly shares his story with others. In speaking out against injustice, he conveys the importance of continuing one's education, whether formal or otherwise. He also touches on the effects of incarceration and the disenfranchisement of economically disadvantaged people and its overwhelming effects on both their families and the community at large. Yusef also advocates for drastic policy changes relating to the prison industrial complex. He is a firm proponent of video surveillance in all police interactions with so-called suspects, banning solitary confinement for juveniles, and staunchly opposes capital punishment. Since his release more than 14 years ago, Yusef has become a family man, father, poet, activist, and inspirational speaker. He educates people on issues of press ethics and bias, race and law, and the disparities in America's criminal justice system, especially for young men of color. Mr. Raymond Santana. Raymond Santana was sentenced to 5 to 10 years, eventually spending 5 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. The investigation of the convictions of Raymond and the accused teenagers raised questions about police coercion and false confessions, as well as the vulnerability of juveniles during police interrogations. Since his release, he has championed many a cause for justice, especially those in minority communities. He has traveled the speaking circuit, discussing second chances, lies in the media, and false confessions. His reach has extended through several media outlets, including panel forums, interviews, and radio appearances. He is especially proud also that he has taken his platform of influence and justice and mobilized through his participation in peaceful marches, demonstrations, and social media campaigns. So we're going to have them shift down one seat because we got to get the two panelists there. So let's put our hands together and welcome 3 members of the Central Park Five. Yes. Oh, come on, you can give it up. To carry us further along in the process, we're going to welcome 2 moderators who are going to take us forward. First, we have Professor Daniel Levinson Wilk, who is Associate Professor of American History here at FIT. He writes about the history of waiters, elevators, and the modern service sector, publishing in scholarly journals, the trade magazine Elevator World, and popular press like Atlantic Monthly Online, Bloomberg, and Al Jazeera America. He teaches classes here on Hollywood, New York City, the whole history of the United States, The Influence of Darwin, Marx, and Freud on Historians, and 2 new classes in the fall, Classics in African American History and Queer Work, a research seminar in LGBTQ business and labor history. And last, and definitely not least, we have our student moderator, and former student I may add, Ms. Shayna Fairclough, a senior, graduating in May 2017 with her bachelor's degree in fashion business management with a minor in mathematics and English. She was part of the track and field team, where she was awarded Most Valuable Player in 2014. She is a member of the Presidential Scholars Honors Program here at FIT. For over 2 years, she has been actively helping students as a peer writing consultant in the writing studio. So let's give our moderators a round of applause. So as your program states, we will have a discussion between moderators, panelists, and the audience eventually. So we'll start off with the moderators sort of holding the conversation with the panelists initially, and then we'll move into the audience sector. And Professor Levinson will re-stress these instructions, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, we'll sort of read the rules as they relate to the audience portion. Number 1, audience will be limited to asking 1 question. It should not be a multi-part question. If it is, only the first part will be answered. Number 2, once the audience member asks the question, he or she should immediately step away from the microphone and return to seat. 3, please be sure that when you finish speaking, you have indeed asked a question, as opposed to providing a general statement for the evening. Number 4, there will be no follow-up questions offered by the same audience member until all have been served. So, having said that, let's put our hands together one more time for the panelists and the moderators.
Thank you all so much for being here with us. We're all, as you can see, really excited to have you here. And I thought maybe we'd just start off by asking you all what you've been up to in the years since you've been free.
Okay. Well, we've been trying to put our lives back together with the awesome help of our family members. I got my mom in the audience and my brother as well. This journey is a journey where you all have in a way, given us tremendous strength to continue moving forward. I've increased my family size. I have 10 children now.
Congratulations.
I did it for my mama.
Blame mama.
Some grandbabies, But, one of the things that I think that that really is impactful is the work that we've been doing, and of course I can speak for myself, but I think all of us are also we're all on the speaking circuit. But that work towards making sure that there's never another Central Park 5. The reality that just yesterday, Emmett Till's accuser, it was found out that she made the whole story up. It was bad enough what they had did to Emmett Till, but the accusation of him whistling, and then for it to be a complete sham is really, really sad and atrocious. And that same kind of fate could have happened to us. Because, as I remember, and so many others have forgotten, Donald Trump took out those full-page ads calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty 2 weeks after this case happened, after this crime happened. 2 weeks after, Donald Trump had already signed, sealed, and delivered and became the spark that made sure that we were found guilty in the criminal system of injustice. And that wasn't a Freudian slip or anything like that. I call it the criminal system of injustice because it became that for us. The spike wheels of justice rolled down the hill and mowed us all over. And we're still trying to put our lives back together. But through forums like this, we're healed again.
Yeah, it's definitely an everyday process. We still walk through life slowly, right? Walk on eggshells. and also enjoy the viewing at the same time, because back in 1990, there were 400 articles written about us within the first 2 weeks of this case, dissecting the lives of 14 and 15-year-old kids and giving us the label of Wolfpack and Wild Thing and painting a picture of that we were bad kids. And so that we never were able to get away from that, right? We were exonerated in 2002, and there were articles still written about us all the way up to 2012.
Yes.
And so the real change didn't happen until this film came out, and that's not that long ago. So at the end of the day, we're still trying to put our lives back together. It's a rough process, but we just do it one day at a time.
Yes, basically been reconstructing our lives, you know. Like my fellow brothers say, it's an ongoing process. And this whole process is therapeutic. Because when we was incarcerated, we didn't have psychology classes. We didn't have people speak to us. So when we got released and when the film came out, it became therapeutic to speak to you, especially to the youth. Because we lost our youth. We didn't have that. So when we see people that's in college, we live through them. Mm-hmm. So this whole process is refreshing. And this is a good thing. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you know, like a lot of us in college here at FIT weren't exposed to the same things that you guys were exposed to. I wasn't born when this all happened. So what do you feel that we should take away from your experience, and what is the lesson that you want us to learn, you know, going forward with our careers and our lives and everything?
I mean, for me, when we started to do the speaking engagements and we started to go out, and it has taken us all across the country. Me and Yusuf have been to Canada more than once. And the film gave us this voice. It gave us this platform. It gave us this voice for people to see us as who we are, human beings, to see us as kids back then and now adults, and to connect with that visual. And so it gave us that platform to give back, because there's a war, and people don't really get this, but there's a war to steal our youth. And they don't want you to occupy a college setting. They want you to occupy a jail cell. Why? Because it's beneficial, right? It's more money for them. Like we know, like the prison industrial complex goes off of budgets, right? So whoever, you know, New York City has, 71 prisons in it? And when you look at the history of these towns, they were leaning on government assistance before these prisons came in. And so it became a booming business. And so why put you in a college setting when I could put you in a prison cell and get a budget for you annually? And the longer you're there, the more rich we get. And so that's where the war lies, to steal our youth. And so we said that we can come into a forum like this and we can give you our story and we can spark the person who has the solution, and that's what it's about.
Yeah, I definitely echo that, because when you think about the privatization of prisons and the fact that just yesterday there was a judge that was found guilty for taking bribes to send people to prison. You know, some of these prisons are being sold on the stock market and things like that. And the whole idea of the rush to judgment, and as we experience being in the prison industrial complex, we experience far too often that the makeup of black and brown folks, the overwhelming makeup of black and brown folks, and what we charge the people with is the responsibility not to rush to judgment. The responsibility where there's more of a attention towards the fact that when we look at how suspects, quote unquote, are presented to us in the media, if they're black and brown, they're not presented as suspects. Because this young man in Queens, who's been charged, he's been charged for raping and murdering the young lady. Now, we don't know if he did it or not. But the way that the police are spinning the story right now to this day, the way that we've been digesting it through the media, has been one where we've been told this man is the person who did this crime. He is the one who did it. And so he's not really, just like we weren't, and just like many others who look like us aren't given the opportunity to be seen as innocent until they prove us guilty. We're automatically seen as guilty, and we have to prove ourselves innocent. And the worst part about it is that there were laws that were created as a result of the litigation of the Central Park jogger case. Some of those laws were things like where they lowered the age range and said, you know what, we need to start treating young people of color as adults at a younger age. The super predator laws and things like that. You know, somehow we were predisposed, they would say, to criminality. You know, when they found that we didn't do it, they never went back and changed those laws. So those same laws are on the books, and those same laws are the same. They utilize the same process of going out there and rounding up young people en masse and sending them to these places called the prison industrial complex. And it's scary, too, because when you think about what President Donald Trump has presented with this whole Make America Great Again, the presentation is that we're going to bring jobs back to the American citizen. You know, and I can only imagine through what we've seen so far that some of the jobs he's talking about are going to be us maybe building some of the highways by joining the chain gangs, you know, or us building desks like this, and, you know, us maybe making clothing and things like that. I mean, I worked in one of the top industries in the prison, and I made the top pay in the prison. And I made 50 cents an hour. Top pay. I was living high on the hog. You know, but that's some of the takeaways, I think. You know, that whole thing, too, of if we involve ourselves in the process, and many of us will, because we may be going into the sciences of forensics, criminology, things of that nature. And even if we just become, as the outgoing President Barack Obama stated, even if we're just a citizen, if we hold that title of citizen, every single citizen in this country one day gets a letter in the mail saying you've been called to serve on a jury. And the unfortunate part about this case is that there were jurors who were so uncomfortable and couldn't find any real reason to vote guilty, but they were being pressured so that one guy in particular says that he found some cockamamie excuse to vote guilty just so that he can get out of there.
Everyone's hurling imprecations at me and telling me what a rat I am. And I just went along with it at the end because, frankly, I was wiped out. I found some cockamamie excuse to vote guilty just to get out of there.
And we need people to stick to their guns. We need people to really evaluate what they're seeing and not be tricked by the same things that dupe us, and allow us to really turn our ear and turn our heads, because it's not us. And it's not until it's us that we cry out as well and seek the support of the masses.
You know, I think we have to, the youth, we have to dissect the situation. In the 80s, people that was of age during that time, it was a media frenzy. And I think it was not too much logic because of the frenzy. So, for instance, you'll see our names on TV and in the paper, you already rush to judgment. So, knowledge, which is cliche, but knowledge is power. That they can't take away from you. So, I tell the youth to really think for yourselves and stay in the books, study law. And one thing we also need to do is start having more workshops for things like this, for people to be aware. Because there are many people that don't know about the Central Park 5 case. They don't know what it is. They don't know who we are. And I just think we need to be more aware of that so we won't have another Central Park 5 or another Trayvon Martin, another Emmett Till, anything of that nature. So I think we just need to grow together, because when we're together, we form as one, and knowledge is definitely important.
And that's the other thing I want to say about what Kevin is saying, which is interesting too. I just came from speaking to a group of youngsters in a high school in the Bronx, and I had to remind them, as I remind myself, especially because I have 10 children, you know. Gotta think about that. Some people say I was playing catch up, you know. But what I tell them, and I tell my children this as well, you know, my expectation of you is not that you become angels. We don't want you to think that we weren't once your age and that we didn't make mistakes. But the difference is that we want you to think critically as you go into your own lives and you go and you're out there making your decisions. We want you to be able to think critically and say to yourself, is this thing that I'm going to do going to be beneficial towards my future? Or if I get caught, will it be devastating? You know, and if you can make choices that are beneficial, then you can live in what Dr. Adelaide Sanford says is a trilingual kind of youth. A person who knows how to fit in, but at the same time, he's going to, so to speak, he's going to go and hang with the boys and then look at his watch and say, yeah, it's time for me to cut out, guys. I'll be back tomorrow because I got to go hit the books. Or I got to go check on my mom, or I got to go do this or do that, you know. So being able to fit in that way, you still don't lose your cool, but at the same time, you get the future goals that you dream about done. Yeah.
All three of you have talked so much about education already. And you talked a little bit about, Raymond, about choosing between the prison cell and the classroom. Kevin, I think you talked a little bit about not having educational opportunities while in jail. But I think that all of you did take some classes before budget cuts came through in particular. I've never been in a prison classroom myself, but I've known a lot of people who have taught in the prison system. And they uniformly have said that teaching prisoners is the most meaningful experience they've ever had in the classroom. No offense to my students out there. I was wondering from your perspective, before they all got cut, what was the meaning of those classes in prison to you?
For me, I had in the beginning, I was surprised I even got in, right? I studied for the GED, I passed the GED. And when I passed, I remember the principal coming down and he said, "You're going to college." And I was just like stuck, like, I'm going to college. I was in the auto body class at the time. And I went through pre-college, and then my first semester, I kind of was just, I'm here, right? I didn't take it as serious. And I wound up getting an academic probation, right? And I said, I can't lose this opportunity. And so I started to take it serious, but it wasn't until I got a Black Studies class, Black History Studies class. And the professor's name was Latif Islam, right? And he was a professor at Marist College, been in prison, had numerous degrees. And he gave us a syllabus, and they had about 5 books on it. And I said, what are all these books if we only using one? And he said, brother, this is for your arsenal. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, don't worry about it. When you start reading, you'll get it. And the first book the first book that I read was Autobiography of Malcolm X, right? And then I want to read A People's History by Howard Zinn, Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, Volumes 1, 2, and 3, Black Economics. And this was a process of me reading these books. Even after his class, I went back, because there was also The Miseducation of the Negro, right, by Carter G. Woodson, and Black Americans by Alfonso Pickney. And then the light bulb went off. And then my whole perspective changed based on that one class on college. And I was able to graduate and get an associate's degree. And then from there, I was able to be, I had the highest level in the prison, right? And then I became the liaison between the prisoners and the administration. And so I achieved, all these accolades in prison, but it was due to that one class. That was my experience.
The experience of being educated in prison, I think, was tremendous for me because what I had experienced while I was in prison was that my mother was going through this tremendous, not necessarily, it was a struggle, but the struggle was that she had my sister and my brother. And my mother was able to send them to college, and they were both able to get college degrees. And here I was in prison, and in my mind, I would say to myself, I want to be able to continue on and do something. And likewise, I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I think that book really, really touched on a real different kind of note for me, because it was the idea that if you have more options than one, you will cease to come through this revolving door, And I kind of chuckled a little bit when you said the budget cuts in terms of the education being pulled out of the prison industrial complex. These were things that were fought for during the Attica riots, And during those concessions, people just really wanted to be treated like people while they were going through the hell of the prison industrial complex. And so just simple things like being able to get educated, being able to have different types of books, being able to, just these things that people fought, that you would think that you wouldn't have to fight for that. And then when they took education out of the prison, I had just received my associate's degree as well. And I was going towards my bachelor's degree. And they cut the program. And so I felt like I was fortunate, because a lot of times people get stuck. Like when I went into other prisons, a lot of these other individuals, they didn't get the opportunity to get educated. And people get stuck because sometimes as they come home, I had the tremendous support system in my family, and especially through my brother as well. Because my brother, I speak about him sometimes, even though he may not know I do, but I speak about him because he taught me something that was really, really profound. And it's the concept of reverse engineering. And what he would tell me all the time, and I still haven't necessarily digested it yet, but I'm in the process, right? But what he would tell me is that the way you do it is you project yourself into the future and you think about what it is that you want to become. And then you step back just before you made that goal, and you figure out what was it that you did before you made the final goal to become what it is that you became. And then you continue to step backwards until your present day, and you have a plan, you have a blueprint, And that thing, I think, was tremendous for me, because it caused me to really get into learning about computers and trying to figure out how can I do things for myself. So even like a cell phone or an iPad or a Mac laptop or a regular laptop or a desktop computer, I told myself how to fix those things. So I could accidentally drop my phone and most people would be like, oh my goodness. And I would kind of just be like, got another project to do, And that whole thing really gave me the opportunity to kind of come home. And even though a lot of doors of success were being shut in my face, I was able to work in my mom's organization, helping with the computer network system and things like that. And also teaching myself more about computers until finally I was able to get a job at New York Presbyterian Hospital and work there. I worked there for about 7 years until I quit. And then I started working out on Long Island at North Shore LIJ. And I quit there, of course, also, because then at that point we won a lawsuit. But the good thing about it was that I kept rising up the ladder of success. And it was that whole education process. Like, to me, it behooves the powers that be to educate the masses of the people, because that's how you produce the best genius in the countries where we are. And unfortunately, a lot of black and brown people have been done a disservice where we don't know anything about ourselves. You know what I'm saying? And even if we know a little bit about ourselves, the truth of the statement that Angela Davis said, that we are people who have historical amnesia, is very present, very much so. So we have to continue to remind ourselves of our greatness. My mother would tell me all the time when I was in prison, she said, you've been given so many gifts, And I didn't really understand what she meant by that until I was listening to a motivational speaker, and he said, your gift is your key to your success. And I said, wow, that's powerful. And to utilize this stage, like they gave us a platform. They gave us this crazy platform where they presented us to the world and everybody geared up to throw tomatoes and eggs and all kind of stuff at all of us. And because it was one of the most famous cases, it was really only a macrocosm of the macrocosms, a macrocosm of the microcosm of many of the other cases that have been out there similar. And the greatest thing about our case, though, is that the truth came out. You know, greatest thing about our case.
I love when I gather with my brothers because we feed off each other, because we share the same experience. Actually, Yusuf and I were in the same prison.
Yeah.
And I remember when the college program came, the year was 1992. And we both was able to gain our associate's degree in 1994. In 95, they stopped.
Yeah.
And I also went on, tried to proceed for my bachelor's. I went to Mercy College, and they stopped right there. And I remember when going through the program, actually I used to write Raymond Santana. We all used to correspond with each other because it felt so good from what we've been through in '89 to feel good about ourselves going to college and showing that we were just more than what they perceived us as, like being animals or things of that nature. And it showed that we have a brain. You know, we have families. We're more than that. So it was very self-fulfilling to go through that. And also, when the college program stopped, it didn't stop us.
Yeah.
We was hungry for more. We wanted to learn more. So when we got released into this wilderness, you know, in the 90s, we were vulnerable, but we were still hungry. We wanted to gain knowledge. And just going through this whole thing, just like you used to say, it gave us a platform to do what we're doing now. Because I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be able to speak in front of a crowd. Because in the 80s, we were bashed so much that we was kind of sheltered from that. And thank God to our families, they kept us sheltered, even though they were going through things as well on the outside. Because in prison, we were sheltered from everything. But our parents was getting death threats. They had to change their numbers. We know where you live. Your son should be castrated. You know, things of that nature. I remember in 1989, I was going to high school, Louis D. Brandeis. And friends I thought I had, I would walk down the street. I was still actually I was about to be in trial, and I was bailed out. So I was going to court from the outside. And I remember some friends saying, hey, Kevin Richardson, how you doing? How's everything? But as I walk away, I could hear them saying, that's a rapist right there. So, you know, that still burns, but that also drives me to keep doing what I'm doing, you know. So the whole college program, it was a stepping stone to what we're doing now. And now we're taking that experience and knowledge to move on, you know, move forward, and one day in the future, start our own foundations, help others learn and raise awareness.
Yeah. Right.
So, you know, you have 10 kids. How do you explain your situation to your kids, or have you explained the situation to your kids?
Well, I want to maybe pass the ball to Raymond, because I think his story about how his daughter, who's younger, maybe by a few years in terms of what my daughters are, but I'll come back to it and tell my story about it. But I like the way Raymond tells his story about his daughter.
So my child was, I think, 8 at the time when the film came out, and I was in a room one day, and she just came out and said, I know who the Central Park 5 are, right? And I said, well, who the Central Park 5? And she went to narrate the story. 5 guys who went to jail for something they didn't do. They found out they was innocent when the real man stepped forward. She was 8 years old. And I said, well, where did you get that from? She was like, YouTube, right? So I was like, you can't be on YouTube no more. But then she said, well, also I hear my mommy talking and I hear you talking. So that's how I put it together. And so we fast forward and we did me and Yusuf, I think it was all three of us, we did an event at the IFC where they had the film. And so she begged me to watch the film. Can I see it? Please, please, please. And my cousin came that day, so she went in and watched it with my cousin. So when she came out after the 2 hours, she said, come here. So I said, what happened? She said, come closer. So I bent down and she said, I didn't know you was one of the Central Park Five. And I said, well, what did you think? I was like, producer? And so that night we went home and she had her own bed, but she didn't want to sleep in the bed. She wanted to sleep in my bed. Right? And she was like, I want to be close to my daddy. And I said, okay. And so she said, you know, Daddy, you know who I really feel sorry for? And I said, who? And she said, Corey. And I said, what about your daddy? She said, my dad, don't worry about it. But as an 8-year-old, she got it. You know, she understood it. And even from then till now, you know, the whole Trump thing, like she understands that she gets it. But we knew at that point that we can talk to an 8-year-old. We can teach them, and they will get it. And that's why sometimes even our forums, when we speak to kids, they go as young as 8. Mm-hmm. Because I knew she got it. She got it, everybody can get it. Yeah. You know, but that was my child.
I tell you, my situation, it's weird because my daughters are very observant. They observe a lot. You know, the actual blend is that when I met my wife, she had 3 children from a previous marriage, and I had 3 children from a previous marriage. So we became a Brady Bunch just like that. You know, she had 2 boys and a girl, and I had 3 girls. And as we increased our family, you know, a girl came out, and then another girl came out. And so if people have been keeping count, that's 8 enough, you know. But then another girl came out, and you know, when I think about the power of women, you know, women are the ones who give birth to the nation. Women are the first teachers, and just this, I mean, it was tremendous that I was being blessed, because as I looked at this whole process, I said, wow, I'm just like Malcolm X, you know, prophetic, you know what I mean? Hopefully not the bad part though, right? Yeah. But my last child was born to me on my birthday of last year, 27th of the month, of this month. And I gave him my name, and it was tremendous because it was a boy, you know, but it was scary at the same time too. Because even though I gave him my name, in a way I hoped that it would shield him. But I know that young men of color aren't really shielded, you know. Even when we were going through our trials, you know, Raymond was still in prison, but me and Kevin got bailed out. And when they murdered Yusuf Hawkins, the young men who murdered Yusuf Hawkins were given bulletproof vests and shields and all kind of stuff. They didn't give us none of that. And people hated us more, you know. And so as my daughters, you know, my middle daughter from my first marriage, she would be like, Daddy, you famous. And I'm like, you know, she only experiences the aftermath. She never knew what it was like for us to go through this hell. For us to be looked at as some of the most hated people in the world. You know, for nobody to apologize to us who put us through this hell. Nobody to apologize to our parents, our siblings. You know, the only apology I think I've ever seen has come in the form of a book called The Art of Justice. I forget the courtroom artist's name, but she was one of the chief artists that would go into these famous trials, and she would draw John Gotti, and she would draw the Central Park Five. And one of the things she says in the book, which is really, really telling, is she says she was so sorry for the way that she drew us, because she realized that her art led to us getting convicted. when you looked, they had cameras, but a lot of people were looking at newspapers. And so if you look at the newspaper and you read it and you see the way we were being depicted, it was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, we could sacrifice those guys because those are animals. They look like animals, And all of that stuff was by design, And so for my daughters, one of the things that's interesting is that even though they observe a lot, I try to make sure that they're shielded in a way because I don't want them to be naive to think that their dad is famous or their uncles through fire is famous, and that we didn't go through something, that there's still a point of caution to be had when you move about, and especially because of the fact that we won a lawsuit. I don't want them to ever be taken advantage of, Somebody might say, wow, I'm going to just try to hoodwink them and get that money, The money's in a safe. In another state. The bank, yeah.
Well, I don't have 10 kids. I have one child. She's 8 as well. And it's scary, too, because she sees what I've been through, and she feels very sad. She can't put it together why what happened to me as well as the others, but I want to install in her to be strong because this is a rough society we're in. And I remember the other day she brought me a homework assignment. She said, hey, I have to do a paper on Trump. I said, oh.
Let me help you with this one, right?
I said, you're going to get an A+, honors, but she, like Raymond said, like his daughter Malia, she gets it, and she got it too, and she broke down everything. She was a little biased because of what I've been through, but to see her put those words together and explain how she feels, her own views, and how she feels that at the time that he shouldn't be elected. Coming from an 8-year-old, and that made me proud, but it also made me a little nervous because of what we've been through, and from when Trump had put the ads out about us.
You better believe that I hate the people that took this girl and raped her brutally. You better believe it.
Trump put his money where his mouth is by taking out this full-page ad in 4 New York City newspapers. Bring back the death penalty.
She didn't know our families, didn't know where we came from, he didn't know our upbringings, But just to see her articulate those words, I felt very proud about that.
Yeah. Okay, so Shayna, I feel like we've asked enough questions.
Yeah.
So why don't we get the lights up a little bit on the audience? Some people want to line up at the mics. We will take some questions. I'm going to tell you the rules one more time. Audience will be limited to asking one question. It should not be a multi-part question. If it is, only the first part will be answered. 2, once the audience member asks the questions, she or he should immediately step away from the microphone and return to the seat. 3, please be sure that when you finish speaking, you have indeed asked a question, as opposed to providing a general statement. 4, there will be no follow-up questions. 1 question will be sufficient. We really want to let as many people speak as possible, so please be as brief in your questions. Thank you.
Wow.
Cool. Okay, start us off.
That's my mama.
Now you all. Wow. I'm not going to say very much, but I do want to thank you all for coming out. And I want to let you know, this is my alma mater. FIT.
I was going to say.
That's right. Let them know.
It's been a few years, but we have a lot in common. And, when you're going through this type of thing, you really have to get yourself together. And it's not an easy process. It wasn't an easy process for any of our families to do that type of thing. But it's just something that you have to do because your child is out there and he's sinking fast and you can't swim, but you need to figure out where to get the life racket. So when you're doing this, I'm sure all of you all have all this strength in you when it comes time to saving your families and doing what you have to do. But the main thing is just to be strong and take it one day at a time. And no matter how you feel, when you're crawling up in that knot, just stand up some kind of way, even if you have to be crooked, and get on out the door and do what you have to do. And thanks again for coming out.
So I guess I have to correct myself. We were taking one statement from the crowd, but that's the only one. You want to start us off over here on this side?
Sure. Thank you guys for sharing your stories of triumph. Being able to capitalize on the educational opportunities. Some of the taking the lemons and making lemonade out of the process. But from my own personal experience through my family, I'm well aware of some of the actual harsh realities of what's happening behind the prison gates, and we kind of haven't really touched on those things. But documentaries like the 13th shows like The Night Of try to really touch on the humanity of the actual people that are going through this prison pipeline, through this industrial complex. So my question to you all is, what are your views on how crime and punishment can be addressed in a way that everyone involved, the victims, the suspects, the people who are part of the process, and the people that are observing the process, can actually understand the humanity in a way that we all can be aware that I know that I put you in jail, or I know that I am responsible for your life. I know that if something happens to you, the rest of your life will be impacted because of something I choose to do. So what's your view on how we can address crime and punishment in a way that we're all responsible for the outcome versus it's on what you guys choose to do when you
Well, the first thing that we do is we ask people not to rush to judgment, right? When you had the incident in Brooklyn a while back where the 5 kids was hanging out in the playground, they got accused of raping a woman.
Yeah.
And quickly, people in the community said, throw them under the prison. And then what happens, they don't even get charged, right? And so that's one thing that we ask. We ask people not to be so fast to rush to judgment. That's what happened to us. Because what happens is that the media criminalizes us, right? They paint this picture of you being a bad person. And what it does is it makes people look at you and say, well, maybe he was doing something that wasn't right. And then it makes them turn their back on you. And once you don't have that support from your community, the system feels it can do whatever it wants to you. And that's what happens. That's what happened to Trayvon Martin, right? That's what happened to Mike Brown. The first thing they do is they look at that file and they say, what can we prove? If we paint a picture that he's a bad guy, people will believe it. It's all about credibility. We went through a civil suit that lasted 11 years, and it was based on credibility. The first thing they did to our parents, my sister's in the audience, my nephew's in the audience, the first thing they did to our parents and our siblings was that they went back 25 years into your history, right? And they looked at whether you was on welfare, whether you owe money, right? Stuff that has no substance to the case, no relevance to the case. But that's the stuff that came up in depositions, because it was about proving that your credibility was bad. And they put you on the stand. They put those things up there. They want to see first if you're going to run, and then second, if they can make you look bad. And so the first answer is that we gotta push that stuff away and not be so quick to believe what the media puts out there so fast.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I would encourage us as we move into the future as a country is we need to look at other countries and the way that they have their prisons set up. Because we went from being a correctional facility country to being a prison industrial complex country. And what I mean by that is, it used to be that in this country, you would go to jail for a crime that you committed, and you would go and get your behavior corrected so that you can return back to society a productive citizen. And now they're warehouse folks. Now there's this sick kind of thing that goes on where, if you are that terrible of a person, they'll give you 3 life sentences plus 100 years. Impossible time that you can do, of course, But that whole thing, in addition to the whole rush to judgment, in addition to us remembering Newton's third law of motion. And I say that because, my mother's right here, and I'm happy that I'm happy that she's still here with us, first of all. But when you and I look at some of the old footage, they would take pictures after they done called us out of our names, and my mother would be responding. Or they would push my mother, and then they would take a picture, and so the picture that was painted was angry black woman. You see what I'm saying? And so they never showed the action that caused the reaction. Even with the young men that were in Brooklyn, the 5 young men, the thing that was to their benefit was that they had a video recording or something like that that saved their lives, And I mean, in our case, we didn't have that. As a matter of fact, the worst part about our case was that people believed the negative residue that was left because of these false confessions. They saw them. In this film, you see them side by side. You see clearly that nothing that's being stated is matching anything that happened.
Then we saw this lady jogger. She had on gray shorts with black biking pants and a white tank top.
I observed the male, Black Kevin, with scratch on face, was struggling with a female.
The tall, thin black guy hit her in the ribs with a pipe.
I moved back and everybody started feeling on her.
Antron came and started ripping her clothes off.
The Puerto Rican kid with the black hoodie jumped on her.
I tried to grab her. I got scratched on my face.
Antron pulled her pants off and she was screaming.
Antron had sex with her.
Then Kevin got on.
That's when she was yelling, "Stop and help." I was the one that didn't rape her.
Kevin pulled down his pants and had sex with her. When she was on the floor, I grabbed her.
But somehow, the public was able to digest that. And so it's funny because, that whole idea when they said we were being judged by a jury of your peers, we probably at the same time would look on the witness stand and the same remarks that comedians would make. I don't see my man Bobo and Raheem up here. Who are these folks? And that's the worst part, the jury pool. The people who are there to judge you, you know what I'm saying? They're not always given the proper information, and it's skewed. My late attorney, William Kunstler, for my appeal, he would say that this trial was such a trial that Jesus Christ himself couldn't have won it. And that's very, very important to think about. They wanted us to be guilty, but it was the whole stigmatization and the idea that we, because of the color of our skin, are predisposed to being criminals.
Just to touch on that a little bit, we have to become our own investigators and, like I stressed before, really dissect the situation, because, not blaming all media, but media has a way to throw you for a loop, because that was, they looked at us as like we were animals without knowing our background. So we just really have to really gain knowledge for ourselves and really break it down and form together, because I'll tell you, I thank God for my mother. She always told me that the truth will come out. I didn't really dissect that at the time because I was facing a 5 to 10 years at 14 years old. But, I believe in God. But even at that time, I felt like God was swaying away from me. I was starting to lose my religion because I didn't understand how someone that's innocent could be going through this. But now, as 42 years old, I see that I was destined to do this. I was destined to have this platform to speak to others and raise awareness so we could build and keep building and become one.
Nice.
And I know it's not my place, but I want to give an answer to this question also. Okay. Go read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, if you haven't yet. Everybody in the country should read that book.
I mean, the other thing I just realized.
Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow.
Yes, indeed. The other thing I just realized too that he spoke about too, and just really quickly, I want to touch on this, because we got Donald Trump in office. I gotta say this, you know. I gotta say this. I mean, the founding documents of this country, the Constitution of the United States, has within it the 13th Amendment. And it doesn't say, I mean, see, language is very important because we have to understand what's being said and how it's being said and how it's being used. But it doesn't say that for the punishment of a crime, we will turn you into a prisoner. It says specifically, for the punishment of a crime, we can turn you back into a slave. This is in the Constitution of the United States right now. You know what I'm saying? And that's very, very important as we move forward and build resistance.
Please See 13th, directed by Ava DuVernay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. You really have to pay attention to that. And The Night Of was actually very deep, too, about the breakdown of it.
Yeah.
Please, over here.
Hey, so me and my best friend, we are actually Harlemites. We went to high
Okay.
school on 114th and 7th, not
Nice.
too far from Century Park North.
We stalk your story.
We've been following this story for like years now. And we've recently been noticing how the neighborhood of Harlem has undergone this huge like reconstruction and is becoming more and more gentrified. And I was thinking about what you said earlier, Yusuf, about how African American men are not shielded, but yet we have people who are not of color coming into these neighborhoods, a neighborhood that I grew up in, that I've been living practically my whole life, and they are more protected than me. I'm being looked at by someone who moved in here a year ago, and they're looking at me like I'm...
You're out of place.
Right, and I'm like, bro, like, I've been played stickball in the street and flag football I don't know how many times, so I just wanted to get on you guys' opinion on, as a community, how can we do to make sure that it doesn't cause issues between us and other, people, men of color, between police and the people who are new to the neighborhood and moving in.
Ooh. I'm going to tell you, I got to touch on the police thing. I got to touch on that. One day I was riding my bike home. I lived on 138th Street at the time. And I'm riding my bike, and it got dark. And I got to 116th and Malcolm X. And I said, you know what? Let me be safe. Let me get off the street and get on the sidewalk. And as soon as I did that, 2 officers snatched me off my bike. Now, you can imagine Drake's song was already playing in my head, and he didn't even come out with it yet.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I went from 0 to 100 real quick. And the funny thing was, and it's not really funny because it's sad, but the funny thing was, I almost had like this out-of-body experience, and I immediately put my bike in between me and them. And then I began to tell them that I knew what they were doing because they started forming a certain way. They were getting ready for me, right? And then I started breaking some things down. And then I told them who I was. People had gathered around. A little crowd was there, and I'm surprised it's not on World Star or nothing like that, But the thing that was important was that I was able somehow to keep my head and to engage them intelligently in conversation. They asked me, after everything was said and done, if I could come down to the precinct and be a liaison between them and the people. Now, and I thought about that because, see, my mother would say to me when we were growing up, and my brother and my sister, she would say, she was raised in the Jim Crow South. And she kind of instilled in us that really officers aren't your friend. They're there to continue the same oppressive regime, right? They're good officers, but when you think about the corrupt cops that we met, that was something that was a part of their fiber and the fabric of their lives, And so for them to tell me, listen, can you come down to the precinct to be a liaison? They need to get more training. Back in the days, cops used to walk the beat. And they would know little Johnny or Pete or whoever it was that they were coming in contact with on a daily basis. They would be able to give concessions because they knew that this person was just acting up or just, you know, doing whatever. They knew their families. And so they gave them, they lowered their wings in many times to them. You know what I'm saying? And now it's just, no, we hit you up in the head with a nightstick. And see, my main point to these officers was, I didn't know that it was against the law if you're over the age of 12 to ride your bike on the sidewalk. When we were in California, I had made a joke and I said, you know, the people would question and maybe take your New York card if you didn't jaywalk. That's a New York thing to do. And the guy kind of leaned over and said, man, don't jaywalk out here. It's serious. They give you a ticket. You know, it's real. And I'm like, wow, you know, it's against the law in New York as well, but that's just a New York thing to do. And the real problem is, like my mom would always say, they have not continued the process of educating us towards civics and towards the law and towards things that really would allow us to move forward as a people. The other thing about the thing that can be done as people move into communities that are already inhabited is there has to be a process where people get to know one another. Because it's because of the unknown that people fear. They fear the unknown. They don't realize that, like, people have been lied to. They've been lied to for years. They were told, don't go above 110. Don't go above 110. No, they said don't go above 96th Street.
96th Street, yeah.
Don't go above 96th Street, especially at night. If you go up there walking crowds, and what they found out is that they can come up to 125th, 145th, 155th, and above, and even knock on our doors and say, hey, can I get a cup of sugar? And guess what? We will give it to them. They've been lied to.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's most unfortunate, because the same benefits of sorts that come from gentrification, oh, that's what we wanted before. We wanted to live in clean and nice communities as well. You know what I'm saying? You know? But I think that has to happen. And the process of getting that to happen is really what we need to figure out. But it has to happen. You know, we need to be able to get away from that, you know, we're living in a bubble and I'm just on my phone kind of thing. You know? We've got to know one another again. You know? Yeah.
Should we jump over to the next one? Okay, please, over here.
Hi. In 1989, I was a little girl living in the South, and I was largely insulated from this story. But I actively avoided hearing the full story because I was confident I couldn't handle it. I knew that innocent children went to jail for a crime they did not commit. I'm pretty sure that there's not a person on the planet who does not think they've experienced some form of injustice at some point or another in their life. But what you guys went through is something that most of us will never, ever experience. I read the book a couple years ago. I took a class here, and Professor Fallon, he assigned the book, and I couldn't avoid it any longer. And it was just as awful as I imagined it to be when I was trying not to come in contact with it. So my question is, how did you get through those years and not give up? How did this not destroy you? Because I can't imagine, I mean, I know you have supportive families, but when you were in those cells at night, you were by yourselves. Mm-hmm. So how were you able to get through this? How did you survive?
I mean, sometimes I don't even know that. Like, I don't even know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. It's just, like Yusuf always says, like, when you're walking through hell, you just got to keep walking. And for me, there was no other option, right? I wasn't going to take my own life. I wasn't going to say, you know what, I'm just going to become an animal and just accumulate all this time. It was just about, you got to just get through this process, one day at a time. You know, and that's the thing about time. It keeps moving. You just got to stay busy. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, 7 years has went by. You know, and then you say, all right, I got a chance to try to do something with my life, right? And you try to seize the moment. You try to seize opportunities. But then you find that there are none. For us, there weren't too many. As you see, when you watch the film, you'll see that in the film, for me, there wasn't too many. But it was just about moving forward, and just taking it one day at a time. And that was it. And that's how I live life today. So I don't look too much into the future. I look at the past a lot to keep me moving. But I try to live in the moment and try to enjoy every minute that I can get. Because nobody's promised tomorrow.
Yeah. I think one of the things that came to me very, very early in my prison bid was a question from an officer that really sparked a movement in me. And the question was, who was I? And in my confusion and in my naivety, I answered him in the way that most people would. I said, I'm the guy that they accused of raping the Central Park jogger, or one of the guys that they accused of raping the Central Park jogger. And he said, I know that. And this is Brother Jerome Jones, you know. And Jerome said, I know that. He said, but who is Yusef Salaam? Why are you here? And it's weird because he was that kind of officer in there. He was like the one that would try to get the inmates to think about a higher purpose and to try to do things with their lives, even though we were going through this hell. And it got me to thinking that, you know, when I grew up, when I was being asked who I was when I was younger, people would always say, when I would say Yusef, they would say Joseph. And they said it so much that I thought they had a speech impediment. Like they just couldn't formulate the word Yusef, you know. And then now here I'm in prison and I'm being asked this, so to speak, philosophical question. And it got me to really going into what does Yusef mean? Because I know that Yusef's equivalent is Joseph. But as I read scriptures and dived into different books and found out that there was a man named Joseph in the Bible and Yusef in the Quran, same person, who was sent to prison for a crime that he didn't commit. And that crime happened to be rape, you know. He was falsely accused and he came home a free person, you know. And then I started looking into different books of names in Islam and I said, wow, I found out that Yusef means God will increase. And my whole name is not just Yusef Salaam, but my mother gave me the name Yusef Idris Fahadil Abdus Salam. So Yusef means God will increase. Idris, I found out, meant the teacher. And Fahadil is a conjunction which means fa with adl, fa'adl, with justice. And of course, salam is peace. And so when you put it all together, here I am in prison being blown away by the knowledge of who I am. And that I was given the name of power, that God will increase the teacher with justice and peace. And so in a way, that kind of propelled me forward. And as I got visits from my mother on a more than a normal basis, which was great, you know, she also was able to assist some of the inmates in there. And you know, it's funny because I sometimes joke about this. I say, you know, my mother had an organization that started off called Mother's Love, and it turned into People United for Children. And she would bring people from the community, and they would come into the prison, and they would cook for the whole facility. And it was like Thanksgiving. And people were allowed to take food back up to their rooms, and you know, I mean, it was a tremendous, tremendous thing. And in a way, I kind of feel like my mother was letting them know, don't kill my son because the cook won't come back. You know? But that thing that we look back on and we recognize so readily that we don't know when we're going through it is tremendous. And that thing is our history. We don't know the future, but when we look back at our history and we look back at things that have already passed, we're so thankful of the gifts. And even the prison thing. I mean, prison, you would think prison would be, I don't want this, you know? But I think every one of us have been asked on some stage or some form or another, would we ever go back in time if we could and change it? And I think all of us have always answered no. Because if you change one thing, his daughter wouldn't be in his life, my 10 daughters wouldn't, well, 10 daughters, 7 daughters, and am I trying to push this thing? Don't tell Synovia. I didn't say 10. I didn't say 10 daughters. It's 3 boys and 7 girls. And I'm not saying that the boys are girls. No, I'm talking about, I don't want to project. that Beyonce spell that people were talking about.
Yeah.
And I come home and she, hey baby, I'm pregnant again. You know, but I wouldn't be able to, that wouldn't be my reality today. You know what I'm saying? And I think that is important, because when you go through things and you realize that you were chosen to go through them, who better to tell the story of the criminal justice system? Who better to tell the story of innocent lives being stolen? Who better to tell the story of the overwhelming impact that happens when you remove a person from the society and the community that they came from, and there's a void that needs to be filled? Who better to tell that story than those of us who have gone through it? You know? And so because we're able to kind of synthesize the process and bring it into today, I think that's very important. And of course, you know, gives us the strength to fight against Donald Trump.
You know, you made a good point, because you said, you know, we had visits and everything, but our families wasn't there once the doors were locked in the cell. And I just believe someone was looking after me. You know, whatever your religious beliefs are, you know, I just felt that God was watching over me. For some reason, he wanted me to get out of this situation, to come out untouched. Even though we all have invisible scars that you don't see, because we have scars that's been branded on us since the 80s, that we went through, things that we share as brothers that nobody else knows. We went through it together. But Raymond also said, I honestly don't know how we got through this. I mean, there's things that, you know, that helped us out, but it was a purpose for each one of us to be sitting here right now speaking to you, because the things that we went through as children, others can't go through as adults. And to be labeled as urban terrorists, wolf pack, guerrillas, things of that nature. I'm just so thankful that we're here to speak to you. And it's just a blessing to really be here. And to go through that during that whole time is just, when I look back at it, when I see the doc, and I see stories, and I see, that was me. 14 years old, now I'm 42. It's just a blessing in disguise.
Stop saying your age.
35.
Okay.
Oh, man. All right. So I see these two figured out how to game the system over here. So go ahead. You got your next question.
Harlem. Okay. So I actually watched this on Netflix like 2 years ago, and like this is my best friend right here. I'm a design major at this school, and when I saw you guys were coming here, it was like a dream come true for me, because I've been watching. I still put this story on. I have it on Amazon, everything. So my question to you guys is, what was your immediate feelings once Trump got elected for president?
Wow.
How much time we have left?
Ooh.
Okay.
Man, oh man. The thing for me was, because I was just done with him, right? And so I was sitting on my couch, and then they asked him, well, they asked him about the Central Park 5, right? And then he said, well, the police said they're guilty, so they're guilty in my eyes. And so I just happened to be sitting on, and I had my phone in my hand, and I was on Twitter. And then I tweeted, and I can't go offhand with it, but it was just about, like, we have nothing to prove to him.
Right.
F him.
Right.
And then, like, a half an hour later, it was on CNN. It was on AM Joy. And
Yes,
I was like, oh, shoot. Right? And then after that, it was like Yusuf was on TV like every day behind that.
I saw it too.
And I was like, wow, just that one tweet, like, this is where we went, But I was really like, I'm done with him. Like, I don't even want to talk about him. Because at that point, it was like, we didn't, like, what more do we have to prove?
Right.
Right? The DNA evidence is there. It proves we didn't do it. Robert Morgenthau, who was in office over 25 years, right? even stated himself, like, we messed this case up. What more is there to prove? What does it take? Do we have to sit down with this guy? Like, what does it? I mean, I hope we don't do that. Right. But what more do we have to prove? What more do we have to tell you that we're innocent? Right. I mean, now we've been exonerated now since 2002. And if you ask him the same question, he probably would still say we guilty.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he when we won the lawsuit, he stated publicly that we were going to be rich rapists.
Yeah, he said this was the biggest heist in New York City.
Biggest heist in New York City ever, and we're going to be rich rapists. But I think that spark that Raymond is talking about was tremendous because it also gave me the opportunity to write a few op-eds and a few different, go on these different shows to be interviewed. But at the same time, I think the country was let down. And I think that even people who voted for Donald Trump, I think they're trying to figure out, what did they do? Like, what? Because, I mean, there's a fascination with this man. And I get it. I truly do get it. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, would you sit down with Donald Trump? And, I said, you know what? If I did, it would be on the heels of him taking out a full-page ad apologizing to the Central Park Five. And on top of that, and I mean, it's a personal beef, of course, that we have with him. Like Raymond said, we got beef. He said, #, we got beef forever. And I had to echo that one. You know what I'm saying? I said, wow, that's powerful right there. Yes, you did. But unlike the others, and by the others, I mean like Jim Brown is a hero. Steve Harvey is an inspiration. I don't want to say was. He's an inspiration to me. But when I saw Steve Harvey coming out of the meeting with Donald Trump, Steve Harvey's face looked like he got caught. He didn't look like it was a good meeting. He looked like he was forced into it, and all of a sudden the cameras showed up, and he was like, "Oh, shucks," And so what I've thought about is that if that was to ever happen, there would never, ever, ever be a possibility for there to be any kind of secret meeting. The cameras would have to be there. The public needs to be able to see. And everything that we need to get off our chest needs to be gotten off of our chest. But, right? Because the but is like to negate everything that came before it. But it has to come on the heels of him taking out full-page ads calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty specifically for our case. He has to apologize. I mean, he's the person in the highest office who has all of the information right in front of him. And to continue to stand on the side of history that states that we are guilty of something, it's the same idea that we're guilty because of the color of our skin. You know what I'm saying?
Just really quick, when he became, it's even hard to even say President Trump.
Yeah, it's hard.
I don't say
my president.
I don't say
not my president.
It's not.
Trump.
And it is very personal. It is very personal. And I remember him running, I thought it was a joke. I'm like, it'll go by, it'll be okay. Even if you didn't believe in Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
But he cannot become the president. I just can't believe it. And when it did happen, me and my wife is here, Jahan C. Richardson. We both woke up out of our sleeps. Like it was a dream. It was a nightmare, but we didn't wake up from it. And we just couldn't believe that this is happening right now.
Yeah.
And I would definitely like to sit down with him and look at him in his face and use logic and explain to us why you still feel the same way you do. Because I just think it's ignorance. And yes, it is very personal.
Now, what you got to understand too is that we don't ever believe that he's going to sit down with us at all. So this is a great hypothetical, of course. I just had to put that.
You've been waiting for about what, 15 years for him to sit down with us?
Man, you know, I want to echo something that my uncle Roland Martin said on the TV the other day. You know, he said we're gonna fight until hell freezes over, and if that happens, then we're gonna be fighting on the ice. That's just how we, you know, like literally, like we don't walk in fear, because the worst thing that happened to us happened. And the best thing is that we're highly recognizable. But the worst part is the rest of the country. The worst part is that you got this man who, the rest of the world, not just the rest of the country, you got a person who has his finger on the Twitter button uncontrollably. Like that itchy thing that some of the cops get told that, you know, you need to retire. You got an itchy finger shooting too many people, you know. That Twitter finger button is on the button for the nuclear button. We got to think, I mean, we're in a critical point. And it's crazy because people would always say, well, let's just wait and see. I think we've seen enough. I think we've seen enough.
Please. Thank you guys for coming out. As you guys pointed out earlier in the cases or in your trials, evidence was twisted in a way to make the jury think that you were guilty of the actions you were charged with. What changes would you make to the evidence system, or basically any to ensure fairness? What would you change as far as evidence admissions in the court system or criminal
In the court
cases?
system? Well, one, we asked that prosecutors don't have immunity, right? Take away that. Because what happened was that in our case, they were protected, and the reason why they got named in a lawsuit was because they acted as lead investigators. Right. So when you see them out there, as the information is coming, it's not just, you know, the police are the ones supposed to gather the information and then bring it to them, and then they assess it, but they went out there and they gathered the information. And that was the only reason why we was able to put their names in the lawsuit. So take away their immunity as prosecutors. Hold them responsible. You know, during this whole civil suit process, which took 11 years to get it done, we conducted close to 100 depositions. And the stuff that they were saying in these depositions was outrageous. Like, literally. Like, they'll sit there, you know, Elizabeth Lederer, Linda Fairstein could get on TV and say, well, Ken Burns doesn't have all the facts. He don't know what he's doing. This case is in litigation, and when we get to trial, all this stuff will come out. It is going to come out in another year or two, and you guys will get to read her deposition unless they exit out. And you'll hear her saying, well, all I did was answer phone calls and send out some emails. Talk to Lederer. She handled this case. And so, but it's because of that, like Jim Dwyer said, being protected in the system.
Institutional protection.
Institutional protection is the reason why they got away with it for so long. I mean, there's depositions of police officers, corruption, right? Or Humberto Arroyo, who was detective in my case, who got caught in a sting in Washington Heights, where they found this dead guy, and in the trunk of the car was $30,000, and they split it. And the only reason why they got caught was because the rookie turned them in. And it was maybe an article on in the paper, but he was able to retire and move to Florida and live comfortably, right? There was another detective who moved to Florida after he retired, and he got caught in a conspiracy case. He was hired muscle for the mob. And then he came to a deposition, and he said, I'm a decorated officer, on the force 20 years. And they said, well, answer this. And he said, I plead the fifth. Right? Then there was Mike Sheen, who worked on Fox 5, Channel 11 News. Right? And he was under investigation by the feds. Why? Because he would go to work, clock in, and his sister owned the bar. And he would hang out at the bar all day, stealing company time.
Yeah.
Then he had numerous DWIs. And what happened? One day he was driving drunk and he hit a police horse. And then he got a slap on the wrist. And he went on to finish being an actor and work on television.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that if you take away this immunity, they have to do their job. And that's what we ask. Do your job. This was a square piece that was put into a circle. And it was stuffed in, and they said, it looks nice, doesn't it? Let's proceed on. And that's what happened here. Everybody failed.
Yeah, the system definitely failed us. I mean, my answer would be that we just need to completely dismantle it and put something else in its place. This whole system is built on the image that comes to my mind is the image of the old V8 commercials. And I'm not sure if people remember the V8 commercials. These commercials, you drink this cup of vitamin and nutrients and all of this stuff, vegetables, and you would be able to stand up straight because you had a V8. But everybody else would be leaning to the side. And the worst part is that there's so many people leaning to the side in these, like Bob Marley, he said the universities are producing thieves and murderers. You know what I'm saying? In the highest offices. Not thieves and murderers like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to become a better thief and a better murderer. But in a way, yes. Because if you become a corrupt cop, and then you're able to build your careers off of the backs of others like us, it's really, really a system that has to be completely dismantled. You can't go forward with a system like that as we look and we continue to see. They're shooting people down on camera. They're getting slaps on the wrist. This system is, and we can't, and that's the other thing, we cannot continue to dance around the racism in the room. We got to call that stuff out because it's blatantly racist. And they've already put it in the Constitution that we're the ones, the people of color, and if you happen to be the person who is considered not of color, who is helping out the people of color, you're going to get caught and they're going to put their foot on your neck as well. We got to completely dismantle it. The system is broken. Completely broken.
Testing, hello. So as we see the time is far spent, you can never, sometimes you just got to put a comma there. So what we'll do is, unfortunately, we're going to have to squeeze in one more question. A lot of our student volunteers have assignments, homework, you know how it is. But before we do that, I did want to make sure that we honor the members of the Central Park 5 who were not here. So for Antron McCray and Corey Wise, can we just put our hands together? And unfortunately, I guess we'll go as long as it's quick. Because we want to be conscious of everybody's schedules. And then afterwards, perhaps you can sort of mingle with the speakers down here and maybe get a selfie or something. So.
Okay. Yes, indeed.
We from Harlem, bro.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Hi. I'm sorry. That's too loud.
I'm sorry. Can I just make a quick, maybe suggestion? You can yay or nay. I know that the people wanted to ask a question, but instead of us answering the question right after it, maybe they can just shoot those questions at us. And then at the end, we just answer as much as we can remember. Because I'm looking at the folks that were standing there. They've been standing there for a long time.
They have.
You know what I'm saying?
It's no, right kind of way. I mean, But anyway, so
I mean, if you ask your question, then this one, and then we'll try to summarize everything.
As quick as possible.
With our answer, yes.
Right.
Please, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Marjorie Phillips, and it's a bad memory for all of us. So on behalf of all of us, I would like to say I'm sorry for what you went through.
Thank you. Are we going to do a few more questions, sir?
I'm looking at the audience.
My question to you is, moving forward, what would you suggest, given the current climate, we seem to be moving backwards, and Trump is in office, what would you suggest that we do? How can we help? And we're not getting paid for what we're doing. People are like, what can I do? What should I do? What's the next step? What would you recommend for the average person, female, male, whoever, young, old, black, white, me, talk to me. What should I do in order to be able to help?
All right, I just took that question down. I'm
Okay.
gonna answer that question. Well, we're going to answer that question right at the end.
Okay.
All right, real fast.
All right, now this is real fast. Ta-Nehisi Coates, in his book Between the World and Me, left a sort of dismal, sort of pessimistic view of being able to change the systemic racism in the country, and of course the criminal injustice system being one of the pieces of that system. Do you guys share that same sort of bleak view of the potential to change the system?
All right, back over here real fast.
Yes, hi, I'm James Barnes. This is Sharon. We put our questions together. Our respect and admiration to everyone on the panel. We want to direct it to Mr. Santana for time's sake, but if anyone else wants to get in, that's fine. So what if you think if we fix this whole everything here by making new prisons? Okay, I know that sounds crazy, but new prisons where people actually go in and get better. We take your classroom experience and we expand it. It's no longer separated by race. And
I wanted to know, I taught in Coxsackie with the prison program there, and was teaching there in 1995 when Pataki got elected and they yanked everything out. I wanted to know if you guys knew if anybody was talking about prison college programs, again, if there's anything happening in the state around that.
All right, 1, 2, 3, real fast.
Thank you so
over here.
much. So my question is, we oftentimes talk about the classroom to prison pipeline. What we neglect to really talk about is the cradle to prison pipeline. So how can we sort of increase the lethargic and apathetic behavior that we experience in a lot of these black and brown communities and sort of increase awareness so that these people who are more prone to being arrested erroneously and more prone to becoming targets, so that can increase. So that was kind of it in a nutshell. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello. With the seemingly rise in cognitive dissonance and people just being willfully obtuse these days, do you feel that the prevalence of social media today can turn the tide on biased journalism and how people are made villains by the media, and then we, the people, feed into it? Do you think social media can change that?
Sorry. Thank you. Only question I have, brothers, I'll hopefully talk to y'all later. But I know the settlement helps. Would you guys think you ever be able to forgive the world? Because, you guys went through it.
So what we'll do is answer all of those in 5 minutes.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So by 8:15, you would have answered all of those different parts.
You still got them written down, too. You're good.
Yeah.
No, we encourage people to get more involved. That's number one. Don't be afraid to get involved. Social media definitely works. It's definitely helpful. The young crowd uses it. It definitely gives you a platform. If I went on there right now and said something crazy, 20 people would jump on it and check me really fast.
Yeah.
The prison programs, I mean, from what we heard, there aren't any in New York State prisons anymore. We need to put that back in there. If you can develop a program and you want to put that in it, I mean, we got to speak to our people in office, because Pataki, that was what he ran on, getting those programs put out, because all they said was, my son, if I want to give him a good education, I just send him to prison. And when somebody says that, it's hard to debate that. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're a person who has been incarcerated and you went through the prison program and you came out and you got a job and you was successful, right? Then it's like, well, we got one person that did it, but that's hard. I hear it all the time. They say, well, let's take away the death penalty. And then somebody walks in and says, well, my son was killed, because of gun violence. How do you debate that? That's hard, But definitely we need prison programs back in there, definitely.
In terms of what can we do with the average person to help, I think what's been done and what's being done in terms of the Blue Now program is great. I actually went through that and became an honorary member. Great, yes indeed, yes indeed. In terms of Ta-Nehisi Coates, I think that the ideas that he has presented so far are right on. I'm right behind those ideas, and they are wonderful. He writes very, very well. In terms of creating new prisons, that are, I would think, better prisons. I think the whole idea of prisons itself is dehumanizing, and what happens and what it causes, especially as we looked at where we were. You know, I looked around and there were officers that had tattoos of black and brown babies with nooses around their necks on their arms. You know, many of the people that were running the prisons were, they used to say to us that they were in prison themselves. You know what I'm saying? So I caution the idea of something has to be done differently. And what I say to that is that we need to look at what other countries are doing, because the examples that we've seen through some of the movies that Michael Moore has made have been tremendous. College programs, like I really don't know about the college programs if they're trying to put things back in. I do know that there's a concerted effort to make sure that we stay dumbed down and that we continue going through that revolving door. So that means that the less educated people are, the more that they think they only have one option. And if they try that one option and if it doesn't work, got to go hit that man in the head and take that money. Social media, I think, is definitely changing the tide of what journalism is and was. Because if Raymond can tweet something and it puts me on TV just from his tweet, that's pretty powerful. People are watching, people are tuned in, and it's important. Forgiving the world, I think there's something to be said about forgiveness. Something tremendous to be said about forgiveness. You know, Dr. Maya Angelou, what she said, and I think the way I want to answer this question is with her quote, which is that we should be angry. You know, Nelson Mandela used to say that being angry and bitter is like drinking poison and expecting your enemies to die. But Maya Angelou said that you should be angry, but you must not be bitter. Bitterness is like cancer, and it eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. So use that anger. You write it. You paint it. You dance it. You march it. You vote it. You do everything about it. You talk it. Never stop talking it. And I think that that's very important, because we can take the frustration and anger that we have inside and produce something new, because we are the people. Wow, that was 8:12? That's the fastest.
That's what I call a speed round answering questions.
Wow.
But anyway, was there anything else?
I think Kevin may want to sum some stuff up. I don't know if you want to look at this or just kind of float on.
Just to piggyback a little bit, just at the end, can we forgive the world? Of course we can, because it wasn't the world that blamed us. We always had our strong supporters that was there for us since day one. We just had the few that was, I would say, ignorant, actually, and didn't have logic to really see what was happening. And piggyback off of Yusuf about being angry, it's good to be angry, but you have to take that anger and
bend it.
And bend it and make it positive, you know what I mean? Because I believe bitterness can send you right to the grave. So you don't want to go, you know, dying as a bitter man, just doing something to change. So I just think, basically, we could forgive the world, basically.
Yeah. And you know, this thing that we're doing, I think, is tremendous. In that, what Kevin just said about bending the reality. You know, we've almost in a way become alchemists, in that we've taken this so negative thing, this thing that would debilitate many and has debilitated many, and we've made lemons out of the lemonade. You know, we made lemonade, rather, out of the lemons, you know. We ain't have no water. We ain't have no sugar. We ain't have no honey. It's bitter, but we got something to drink.
Let's give all of our panelists one more hand. Yeah, so we just really wanted to, again, thank everybody for staying past the time. You know, it's hard to actually stop it when it says it's supposed to be stopped. But again, we want to thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for your support. And feel free to sort of chat with them as we're up here. So again, thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Oh, you know what? I think that was over there
You
on the.
are very good at this. I guess you've had some
Yeah,
practice.
I said very.